Welcome to War Thunder with Subdued. How y'all doing today? Well, I'm here to do some constructive criticism today about fleet actions. Now, you're probably going, what are you going to talk about today? You've already said that fleet doesn't work. And I'm like, yes, you're right. It does not work as designed in War Thunder for one specific reason. When warships go to sea, surface ships that is, they generally do not go as singletons. If you don't understand what a singleton is, it's a independent command at sea. Let's just say USS Baltimore here, pictured on the screen. If she was to go screaming out of the harbor to go out and confront the enemy, she wouldn't do it alone. She would do it as part of either a task force or a task group. Now, a task group might include ships like Helena, Phelps, Caldwell, and Wellborn C. Wood. Wellborn C. Wood would probably not be included in a late war task group or task force for one reason. Most four stackers by this time were well and truly obsolete. Therefore, they would just be consigned to harbor defense. Yes, they were quick little destroyers, but they were about as thin-skinned as you could get. Sometimes the hulls on those poor little boats were rotting through by the end of the war. They were rotting through by the beginning of the war because they were that old and that poorly maintained. Now, let's just say we were going to take this task group to sea. The Commodore in charge would be on either the Helena or the Baltimore. And the reason is they want to be on the ship that has the largest amount of information gathering capability and radio capability. And you're not going to find that on old destroyers. You're not even going to find it on the newer destroyers. You'll find it on the cruisers. And that holds true today. Helena would have had the facilities to be the command ship for the task group. Baltimore would also have had the command facilities and the communications facilities for the task group. Not to mention, it carried airplanes. It could send scouts out, which would bring back even more intel on where the enemy was and the disposition of the enemy. Disposition meaning the number, which way they were driving, what types of enemies. And if we were to play this game properly, this would be a task group. This is what I would take into a mission. And that mission would be, I would take this against an enemy task group or an enemy convoy of some sort. Or it might be to provide ground support. If you don't understand that, it means shore bombardment, where I would sit off the coast and with my massive 8-inch naval guns and my massive 6-inch naval guns and 5-inch naval guns just pound the living heck out of enemy positions inshore. And those 8-inch guns can reach quite a ways. Not to mention that the 6-inch guns can reach quite a ways. And even the 5-inch 38s can reach in quite a long distance. That's because they are not on tanks. It's 127 millimeter, 156 millimeter, and 208 millimeter. Those guns have big breaches. Those big breaches allow them to have rather large powder charges. Those rather large powder charges mean bullets go a long way. And bullets are very big and have large explosive cavities. But this is what would be taken as the Commodore's, task group. All of these ships should be in my match with me at once, following behind the Baltimore, if I designated Baltimore as my command ship. And none of this independent action by individual ships, which is absolutely insane. This would be like a squadron. And my little squadron would go out to do battle and maybe go after an enemy convoy. Now, why Gaijin hasn't made a convoy, one side has to protect the convoy, the other side has to attack and destroy the convoy. That makes sense. This scattering of little bitty islands with capturing a point in the water, which is absolute stupidity on anyone's account. I mean, if I really wanted to play World of Warships, I would play World of Warships. I would like War Thunder to get its act together and make naval worth playing. And like I said, I have 5 ships. I could have more, but I don't want more. 5 ships that I could take into battle at once. Now, if I lose Baltimore or Helena or Phelps or Caldwell or Wellborn, I mean, basically, I'm losing a portion of my shipping. Part of my battle capability. But they would be my weapon capability. I shouldn't be driving a ship with 10 other people driving a ship. The actual number of people in the match should be no more than 3 per side, with at least 3 ships, preferably 5. And those ships should be tied to the Admiral Commodore's ship. They will take their directions from the Commodore. If I say concentrate all fire on one ship, all fire from my battle line concentrates on one ship. And that includes firing off torpedoes, and depth charges at this point are not really a thing because depth charges, that's anti submarine warfare. And unless we're actually going to get submarines, which would be a lone wolf type of affair, depth charges really aren't that useful. Now, torpedoes, they're useful. Especially if I take my battle line up against a battleship. Now, somebody might have 4 battleships or 3 battleships. I don't know how many there are. Let's take a quick look. We've got 1, 2. Yeah, 2 in the U.S. line. Let's see about Germany. Germany has, well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. A couple of those are battle cruisers, but doesn't matter. Russia has 1. Is that a battleship? Yep, 2. Yeah, it's got 2. Great Britain. Oh, let's see. Battle cruiser, battleship, battleship. Japan, I know they've got more than 1. Yeah, battleship, battleship, battle cruiser. So, you see where I'm going here. You've got all these wonderful ships. But the fact that everyone's driving a singleton is not good. Everyone needs to be driving a minimum of 3 ships in the match. And I don't mean drive a ship until it's sunk and then drive another ship until it's sunk and then drive a third ship. I'm talking all 3 ships have to be in the match at once. And you are in charge of those 3 ships, and they will follow you. Unless you tell them, you set the lead and you follow, or line ahead, which means everyone's in front of me. And then that's how it should work. But this is something that needs to change as far as Blue Water Fleet goes. Blue Water ships rarely ever work as singletons. At least in the U.S. fleet. I know that the Germans, the Prince Eugen was up in the Baltics, and she was, protecting. She was firing on Russians that were advancing along the coast, and she didn't have a lot of support, blah, 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 yeah. And other things like that. But for the most part, it was a fleet operation, and ships worked in groups. And that's how they should work in War Thunder. in groups. If I were to take my group like this out, notice they're all premiums except the Baltimore. They would have the firepower to work as a group against another group. Or if the mission was convoy interdiction or convoy protection, they would have the capability of working in that capacity. As a singleton, you can get overwhelmed by a bunch of little boats. As a working group of 5 ships, I would defy singleton small boats to come after you, because the amount of firepower that 5 boats like this that are working together can do is tremendous. And they aren't going to fire on what's just within range, or they'll fire on everything within firing angles. This gun can't turn to that target, but boy, it can hit that target, and it's going to open fire. And that plane up there, well, he gets 5 shooters going after him. Not just 5 guns, 5 ships that can go after him. All together. Because they will all work in concert. And the radar. Let's talk about radar. Baltimore, Helena, Phelps, and Caldwell all had working fire control radar. Fire control radar was designed to be able to guide the guns to hit the targets at range. We don't have that currently. It's Mark 1 Mod 0 eyeball, or whatever you would like to call it. Guesstimate. Fire control radar will be locking up. If you lock up a target, you're saying, that's the one, right there, that's the one I want to hit. Here's the range, bling, 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 bling. Fire, boom. And that's what's going to get hit. Or close to it, anyhow. Radar ranging for fire control purposes was a thing. Especially in ships like Caldwell, Phelps, Helena, and Baltimore. Baltimore especially. Baltimore should be able to give you a pretty near gnat's butt accurate range. And not only range, but course and speed. When her radar locks you up, fire control at that point has everything it needs. Range, course, speed. They already know this ship's speeds. Baltimore knows how fast it's going, what course it's on, and the range to the target. Therefore, when they input all those variables, that's just a matter for the guns to slew on the target, aim, and fire. It's pretty automated. And the more automated that it actually is on the newer ships, USS Cleveland, Brooklyn, Baltimore, Helena, those ships are going to have devastating accuracy. Even the Atlanta is going to have devastating accuracy. Ships like Northampton, New Orleans, Portland, and Pensacola, they're going to have pretty good accuracy, but they're not going to have anywhere near the firepower and accuracy of the late war destroyers, the late war cruisers. And if I were to take Baltimore and Helena out against enemy surface targets, the radar ranging and fire control systems on board those ships should give me a significant advantage. Japanese ships would be way out of their league. And the old battleships, oh, come on. They were using optical rangefinders. And they weren't that good. They were good, but they weren't that good. I mean, just read the accounts of Jutland. Range finding was abysmal. Abysmal as being nice. Horrid. There is a guy on YouTube who talks about all these ships. And I'd love to tell you what his name is. I just can't pronounce it very well. Dashin, I can't pronounce it. But he just did a 2-part discussion over Jutland. The Grand Fleet and the High Seas Fleets clash during World War I, which was one of the largest clashes of battleships and battle cruisers ever, if not the largest clash. And he does go into all the stupid things that happened, like the British overloading their ships with weaponry, more shells and powder than they actually needed, and removing flash doors so that it made their ships go boom. One-hit wonders. I think Indomitable was one of those one-hit wonders. I could be wrong, but it doesn't matter. The fact is, I don't care to deal with USS Wyoming and USS North Dakota. To me, those ships shouldn't even be in the game. Arizona, Pennsylvania, Nevada, basically from Nevada on up, should be in the game. I think that was what, BB 36? Doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, we've got warships that, while on paper they look good, in reality they're slugs, and they should be in reserve status. North Dakota and Wyoming are battleships, but they should be reserve. They should be down here. Um, well, they're saying 3.3 for the destroyers that are in the reserve. So I would make those battleships. Yeah, I would reduce that to about a five, maybe a four. But I would put them here. Battleships of that age should be basically floating targets for modern or more modern cruisers. And especially when you're talking about something like the Baltimore, which has super heavy 8-inch rounds that can penetrate a good distance into armor. It really doesn't say here, but the armor penetration of the Baltimore is quite significant. Not to mention, it's fast, it's maneuverable, and it can see enemy battleships at range and target them at range before the enemy battleships can return the favor. And you should be taking your entire fleet out at once. Now, some people have got 10 slots. If you got 10 slots, take 10. I don't care. But there should only be 3 people on a side taking out all the ships that they want. Now, if you got 5, and let's say you got a 6th one that you paid 200 golden eagles for, and you want to put an airplane in there, and you look at this one, you go 5.7. What can I get in the way of 5.7 aviation that would be useful? And you come down here and you go, well, we've got the AD2 and we got the AM1. AM1 can carry 3 torpedoes. Yeah, that would be all right. Or you look and you go, well, I could always go with an F4U. Or even a bomber. Woo! A heavy bomber, but you're likely not to hit anything. Yeah. That's the sort of thing that you'd be looking at. But that's how you make naval forces actually worthwhile. And for those of you that don't understand, well, like I said, go find this guy, Dashafinal, something like that, on YouTube. He talks almost exclusively about warships. And I'm talking everything from wooden hulled sailing vessels up through much more modern, including Iowa class and such like that. He goes into British, Italian, French, Russian, Japanese, American, Australian. He goes into just about everything. He's not bashful about telling you when a turd's a turd. But he also describes some of the battles. He described the Battle of Samar, where the Japanese battleships caught the jeep carriers and then got stymied by the escort destroyers, which they thought were battleships. And he talks about Saragao Strait and how much of a absolute nightmare the Japanese walked into. There are some great things to learn about fleet actions and various other task group actions. He even talks about the channel dash that the Germans did and what it cost them to make that channel dash. And it wasn't, all roses and lovey. There were quite a few mines that the British had laid and the Germans had laid that the German warships had intimate contact with, if you will. Mines should be in the game as a, that fire and forget weapon that just stays there and really just hangs around, causing all sorts of trouble for everybody. A indiscriminate threat to navigation. Doesn't care whose side you're on, if you hit it, it's going to rip your hull open. But I want to see Naval actually get its act together. And this is one way I think that they can actually get Naval Forces act together so that it's actually playable. Because right now, I do not consider Naval Forces to be playable on any level. Now, Mosquito fleets, or the Brown Water Navy, or the Coastal Fleet, if you will, is useful in larger maps and get rid of the arcadey island groupings. That's just stupidity. That is just absolute stupidity. And make it so that it is task oriented, not capture the point, which is absolute stupidity. Again, if I wanted to play World of Warships, I would play World of Warships. I have played World of Warships. I despised it because it's capture the point. And I will not play a capture the point type of match. That's why I won't play tanks either. It's a different thing when you take an area away from the enemy and then push them and push them. That's a fight. But to capture an arbitrary point that means nothing, and they can capture it back, and you can capture it, and they can capture it, and you can capture it, that's a waste of time. Driving ships, you have to have a basic goal. and you have to use all the sensors. And that includes the Mark 1 Mod 0 eyeball, even at night. Searchlights. A lot of the fights in the Pacific happened at night. Or very early dawn. Like, let's see, what was it? USS Washington coming up behind Hiroshima and just utterly obliterating it. Broadside after broadside directly into the hull, ripping the ship to shreds, turning it into a pyre. Yeah. Radar works. Radar does wonderful things. So, if Gaijin can make those changes to naval forces will become something that's worth actually playing. And I would really like to take my Baltimore, Helena Phelps, Caldwell, and Wellborn, which I'll probably get a different one to take Wellborn's place, because I don't think Wellborn C. Wood is a very capable ship, even though it is rather quick. It's paper. It's got the strength of tissue paper. One good hit from a high explosive 6-inch or 8-inch round is going to just tear the ship to shreds. So, Gaijin, please. Love to play this mode of the game, but until you can make changes like that where it's task group oriented, Naval is not worth playing. This Subdude signing out. Y'all have a pleasant today, better tomorrow. We'll catch you in the sky in air realistic on the good maps, of which there are still damned few. Oh, and if they ever introduce submarines, submarines are singletons. Take care, folks.